The Nuremberg Trial and the Tokyo War Crimes Trials, 1945 to 1948. Following World War II, the victorious Allied governments established the first international criminal tribunals to prosecute high-level political officials and military authorities for war crimes and other wartime atrocities. The four major Allied powers, France, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and the United States, set up the International Military Tribunal, IMT, in Nuremberg, Germany, to prosecute and punish the major war criminals of the European Axis. The IMT presided over a combined trial of senior Nazi political and military leaders, as well as several Nazi organizations. The lesser-known International Military Tribunal for the Far East, IMFET, was created in Tokyo, Japan, pursuant to a 1946 proclamation by U.S. Army General Douglas MacArthur, Supreme Commander for the Allied powers in occupied Japan. The IMFE presided over a series of trials of senior Japanese political and military leaders pursuant to its authority to try and punish Far Eastern war criminals. The concept of transitional justice. The concept of transitional justice first appeared in the course of the third wave of democratization in the late 1980s and the early 1990s. Transitional justice appears as a part of major political and social transformations and aims at creating a democratic and peaceful polity. Therefore, it enables societies in transition from war or authoritarianism to come to terms with their violent past. In other words, transitional justice focuses on how societies can address legacies of past human rights crimes, mass atrocities, genocide, or civil wars. In order to prevent future abuses, it provides societies with a combination of judicial and non-judicial mechanisms such as trials, truth commissions, reparations, memorials, and institutional reforms. Although the modern origins of transitional justice can be traced to after World War I, Phase I of transitional justice began in 1945 with the Allied-run Nuremberg and Tokyo trials at the end of World War II. Phase II of transitional justice refers to the period from the late 1980s to the late 1990s, marking the revival of transitional justice. Phase III of transitional justice refers to the present period since the end of the 20th century. The most striking development is the increasing association of transitional justice with peacebuilding. Transitional justice is intended to fulfill several major aims that can help societies address their violent past, including the recognition of the dignity of individuals, the redress and acknowledgement of violations, and the aim to prevent them from happening again. The peace versus justice debate and identify different approaches to the problem of justice in the wake of conflicts. Societies emerging either from war or from an authoritarian rule face a basic dilemma arising from a potential conflict between peace and justice. On the one hand, victims, survivors, their families, international organizations, and NGOs demand from new governments to prosecute the perpetrators of war crimes and other gross human rights abuses. On the other hand, since post-conflict and transitional processes are fragile or perpetrators retain power, seeking accountability for their crimes may generate destabilizing effects on peace and the consolidation of democracy. Arising from this tension between peace and justice, there are various approaches to the question of justice in peace building. First, the maximalist approach to justice advocates the legal and criminal form of accountability for past human rights abuses. Second, the minimalist approach doubts that criminal justice, particularly trials, can lead to more violence and instability and jeopardize fragile peace-building processes. It considers amnesty as the best way to achieve peace because post-conflict and transitional societies involve vulnerabilities. Third, the moderate approach offers a middle ground between the maximalist focus on retributive justice and the minimalist focus on full impunity and endorses primarily truth commissions as an alternative way of accountability. Fourth, the holistic approach aims to overcome primarily the tension between retributive justice and restorative justice, more specifically between truth commissions and trials. According to the holistic approach, no single transitional justice measure can address the needs and problems of transitional and post-conflict societies. The main mechanisms of transitional justice, namely criminal prosecutions, truth commissions, reparations, institutional reforms, vetting and lustration, and memorials. Transitional justice offers a broad array of judicial and non-judicial mechanisms in addressing past human rights violations following armed conflicts or state repression. Transitional justice mechanisms include criminal prosecutions, truth commissions, reparations, vetting and lustration, institutional reforms, and memorials. These mechanisms can be categorized based on the retributive conception or restorative conception of justice. Retributive justice focuses on perpetrators and seeks to ensure criminal justice for their past abuses mainly through prosecution and punishment. Transitional justice mechanisms based on the retributive conception of justice, therefore, include criminal prosecutions such as trials or tribunals and vetting policies. Restorative justice, on the other hand, is victim-centered and seeks to restore the dignity of victims, re-establish relations between victims and perpetrators, and reintegrate the latter into the society. Transitional justice mechanisms based on the restorative understanding of justice are truth commissions, reparation programs, institutional reforms, and memorials. The major contributions of transitional justice to peace building. According to a new consensus, peace cannot be achieved without justice, and sustainable peace requires some degree of justice. As such, transitional justice has increasingly become an important and integral component of post-conflict peace building. Transitional justice measures can contribute to peace building efforts in several ways. First, transitional justice measures can greatly contribute to the examination of the root causes of the conflict as well as its nature and effects. Second, transitional justice measures can contribute to the rebuilding of state institutions damaged by conflicts. Third, transitional justice can foster trust among individuals and restore the trust of citizens in state institutions. Fourth, transitional justice measures can help to address and reduce the sense of anger and grievances among victims that might otherwise cause a return to the conflict. Fifth, transitional justice and the rule of law are considered as mutually reinforcing each other. Sixth, DDR programs can be also supported by transitional justice measures. Last, transitional justice processes can support SSR policies as well. Rudy G. Teitel coined the term transitional justice in 1991. Distributive justice aims at redressing socio-economic, political, or cultural injustices that underlie the conflict. Maximalist approach to justice advocates the legal and criminal form of accountability for past human rights abuses. The International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia is an example of ad hoc international criminal tribunals created in the 1990s. Vetting refers to official processes for assessing the integrity of an individual to determine his or her suitability for public employment. The complementary aims of transitional justice: building accountable institutions and restoring confidence in them, respect for the rule of law, facilitating peace processes and fostering durable resolution of conflicts, establishing a basis to address the underlying causes of conflict and marginalization, advancing the cause of reconciliation. Truth commissions is primarily endorsed by the moderate approach to justice. The main functions of truth commissions: revealing the extent of past human rights abuses, acknowledging past wrongdoings, fostering social reconciliation after conflicts, contributing to the healing process of victims. The contradictions between transitional justice and peace building. Retributive justice undermines peace efforts, discouraging ex-combatants to lay down their weapons, entrenching existing divisions and hostilities within the society, underestimating the importance of local ownership, neglecting structural inequalities and distributive justice. The South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It had a well-developed institutional structure. It had a power to grant individual amnesty for political crimes. It linked the truth-seeking process with healing and reconciliation. It had a search and seizure power. The International Center for Transitional Justice, ICTJ. The International Center for Transitional Justice works for justice in countries that have endured massive human rights abuses under repression and in conflict. It works with victims, civil society groups, national and international organizations to ensure redress for victims and to help prevent atrocities from happening again. ICTJ was established in March 2001 at the suggestion of the Ford Foundation to explore strategies for helping societies focus on the rights of victims in dealing with legacies of massive human rights abuses and pursuing the search for sustainable peace. It was created at a time when many people with experience working in places like South Africa, Chile, Guatemala, Argentina, and the former Yugoslavia saw the value of creating a specialized organization that could draw on diverse national experiences to provide expert advice to victims groups, civil society, and national and international bodies. By that point, the world had witnessed the political transformation of Latin America's southern cone, the end of the civil wars in Central America, South Africa's dismantling of apartheid, and the collapse of the Soviet Empire. The societies that underwent these changes all had to grapple in some way with their histories of systematic abuse and atrocity, and they did so in very different ways. ICTJ was created to help these societies work through difficult transitions while pursuing justice. The concept of local, indigenous transitional justice. In recent years, transitional justice has increasingly embraced the local by encouraging, employing, and appropriating indigenous norms, traditional mechanisms, and healing rituals to repair communities affected by mass atrocities. There are several factors behind this development of local transitional justice. First, the United Nations and other stakeholders recognized that the transitional justice toolkit cannot be applied uniformly across different political and legal cultures. Second, these actors realized that transitional justice cannot work without local ownership, including community participation. Third, stakeholders were searching for more effective, more efficient, and less costly justice mechanisms than internationalized tribunals and national trials. Fourth, they wanted less state-centric forms of transitional justice given the inability and unwillingness of many states to engage in meaningful accountability. Finally, transitional justice is slowly becoming more responsive to what victims and their communities actually want, which also means taking their cultural values, informal institutions, and everyday practices seriously. Local transitional justice can take many different forms, from Magamba spirit healers in Mozambique to memory initiatives in Guatemala to ritual dispute resolution processes in Timor-Leste. The best known and most fiercely debated examples, Gakaka in post-genocide Rwanda and Moto Aput in northern Uganda, are in Africa. Can transitional justice help promote justice for women? Transitional justice responses to gender-based violations during conflict and authoritarian rule are essential for ensuring justice for victims, combating women's marginalization, and preventing future violations against women and other communities targeted for their gender. Of equal importance is ensuring that transitional justice measures meaningfully address the causes and consequences of all abuses against women, even those that are not inherently gender-based. The past few decades have seen considerable progress in promoting public acknowledgement of gender inequality, discrimination, and gender-based human rights violations. Too often, these acknowledgements do not translate into effective implementation. Much of this failure comes from a lack of technical knowledge to implement measures in a way that encourages women's participation and adequately addresses the gendered nature of human rights violations. This shortcoming is compounded when women are also excluded from the decision-making process. Women must play a central role in the design and implementation of transitional justice measures if policy is to adequately respond to their needs. This is especially true when attempting to implement policy amid ongoing sexual and gender-based violence, where the will and capacity of authorities to investigate falls short. The place of reconciliation in transitional justice. Reconciliation is a complex set of processes that involve building or rebuilding relationships, often in the aftermath of massive and widespread human rights violations. It can occur at the individual, interpersonal, socio-political, and institutional levels and be described as thin if it is based on coexistence with little or no trust, respect, and shared values, or thick if it is based on the restoration of dignity, reversing structural causes of marginalization and discrimination, and restoring victims to their position as rights bearers and citizens. Despite its complexity and contingency, reconciliation does occur in societies left fractured by conflict or repression, with transitional justice processes capable of contributing to it through their outcomes and processes of discourse and participation. Context is a critical factor shaping reconciliation processes and their aims. Fragile settings may emphasize resilience, conflict settings may emphasize peaceful coexistence, and massive displacement settings may emphasize return and reintegration. Different types of reconciliation can occur to varying degrees, alone or in combination. The term reconciliation has long been associated with the field of transitional justice and is often presumed to be one of its goals. At the same time, reconciliation has been both controversial and vague as a concept, giving rise to different understandings and approaches. While in its broadest sense, transitional justice encompasses a wide range of measures in dealing with past abuses, including changes in criminal laws and school textbooks, the creation of memorial and museums, security force and judicial institution reform, and developing distributive justice programs. In a narrower view, it only involves particular mechanisms, namely criminal prosecutions, truth commissions, vetting, and reparation programs. In order to address injustices related to conflicts, Mani suggests an integrated approach to justice that includes three dimensions. Legal justice, which refers to restoring the rule of law by reforming the entire apparatus of the justice system that has been formerly delegitimized or destroyed during or before the conflict. Rectificatory justice, which entails dealing with gross human rights abuses committed during the conflict, including crimes against humanity and war crimes, through trials and prosecutions, truth commissions, lust ration or removal from office, vetting, reparations, and memorials. Distributive justice, which aims at redressing socio-economic, political, or cultural injustices that underlie the conflict. The ICTJ defines the complementary aims of transitional justice as the following: building accountable institutions and restoring confidence in them, making access to justice a reality for the most vulnerable in society in the aftermath of violations, ensuring that women and marginalized groups play an effective role in the pursuit of a just society, respect for the rule of law, facilitating peace processes and fostering durable resolution of conflicts, establishing a basis to address the underlying causes of conflict and marginalization, advancing the cause of reconciliation. Narrower view of the transitional justice practices can be criticized for ignoring root causes and privileging civil and political rights over economic, social, and cultural rights. Narrower view of transitional justice only involves particular mechanisms, namely criminal prosecutions, truth commissions, vetting, and reparation programs. Retributive justice focuses on perpetrators and seeks to ensure criminal justice for their past abuses mainly through prosecution and punishment. Transitional justice mechanisms based on the retributive conception of justice, therefore, include criminal prosecutions such as trials or tribunals and vetting policies. The minimalist approach advocates that rather than trials, political bargains, particularly amnesties, are better in bringing reconciliation after armed conflict due to the need to contain spoilers. Monuments is an example of symbolic reparations in the context of transitional justice. Transitional justice measures can decrease the sense of anger and grievances among victims.